Hello there everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is the second part of the Fisherman Shack series, and in this video we're gonna take a look into how we are gonna sculpt our base mesh over here. So in the last video we blocked out our project, our scene like this, and this is where we left off. And in today's video we are gonna take everything that you've seen here, we're gonna go into ZBrush and we're gonna sculpt some really nice details onto our mesh over here. And once that's done, we're gonna take it back into Blender. So we're gonna come back in here and we're gonna take a look into how we are going to optimize the mesh a little bit, because out of ZBrush we're gonna end up with a really dense mesh, something like 2 or 3 million polygons, and you know, we want to make that a little bit we reduce the poly count a little bit to, you know, save up some memory and pretty much have everything be a little bit more optimized. And after that's done, we're gonna go ahead and we are gonna UV unwrap all of this, all of our meshes, and we're gonna set up the materials for every piece of the mesh, and we're gonna prepare our little scene over here for texturing, which is gonna be for the next part in episode 3. Alright, so without any further ado, what we first want to do to make this a sculptable mesh is, well, there's two things. One, we're gonna need to take care of n-gons. So there's some of those pieces, some of those planks, like this guy over here, who have n-gons, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit when we get to that. And the second thing we want to do is we want to make sure that all those pieces have like really nice and equal topology, because that's gonna be important for sculpting. So let's jump into it and take care of the n-gons first. So if you remember, for the last part we used some booleans to cut out those holes for the windows, for doors and all that good stuff, right? And what's happening is, for instance, in this piece over here, if I isolate that and go into edit mode, actually I think yeah, we need the boolean. So you know what, let me just apply the boolean to all of those, just like that. Apply, apply, apply. This guy and this guy has a boolean. Alright, so go ahead and apply the booleans, right? Because this is the final mesh that you're gonna work with, and that's fine. Alright, I think that's all of them. Yeah, I think so. Alright, so as I was saying, if I isolate this guy and go into edit mode, this face, for instance, is an n-gon, and an n-gon is pretty much a face that holds more than 4 vertices. So if you select this face, for instance, and we look down over here, we can see that we have 8 vertices, and that's not right. We want to have 4. We want this to be a quad. So the way we're gonna do that is, see, the problem comes from those guys, right? From those two guys and in here as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press 1, or Control 1 actually, and first let me make sure that I have the screencast ready. That's better. Maybe even make this like 25 so we can see better. Alright, so again, I'm over here, I'm gonna press Control 1, not bad, yeah. Make sure you're on the vertices, so press 1, and all the way over here I'm gonna press K for the knife tool. I'm gonna hover over these vertices over here until it kind of snaps. You're gonna see that. Left click on that, and then we want to make a straight cut over here. So to make straight cuts, just press the letter C, and you can see that and now it's a straight line. And if I go ahead and I do that, so the knife C, go all the way over there and press space to accept that change, you can see that we've made this cut over here. But what I want to do actually is I want this cut to go all the way around, and I want it to be on this side as well, right? So I'm gonna undo what I've done. I'm gonna jump back into this back view by pressing Ctrl numpad 1. Make sure we have the vertex tool selected, and go into the knife tool, and once again left click C to cut straight, and now press Z, so our cut actually goes through the mesh on the other side. So now if I go to the end, left click on that, I press space to accept, you can see that now this goes all the way across, and that's exactly what I want. And what's great about this thing now is that if I am to select this face, now I only have 5 vertices, right? So it's still not perfect. We still need to do one more thing, and that is we need to take care of this vertex right here, but on the other axis. So we have this face right here, and the problem is it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices, and we only want to have 4 vertices, right? Because we want this to be a perfect quad. And the reason I'm doing this is because once we get this guy into ZBrush and we start using things like the topo, or start to remesh that a little bit, ZBrush is not gonna like it, the fact that we have n-gons, and we're gonna get like really weird artifacts which are gonna mess up the whole mesh. And you know, in order to take care of that, we first need to make sure we have quads. So the same thing I'm gonna do, but upwards, right? I'm gonna press K for the knife tool, make sure you actually have this hole visible. So press K, go onto this vertex, press C so you can go in a straight line. Make sure you press Z as well, and go all the way to the top. Press space, and now you've got that cut all the way over there. And now, as you can see, this is a quad. We have 4 vertices, and this is another quad. We have 4 vertices. This is a quad as well, and those guys are quads as well. So we need to do the same thing for this part over here, right? And that's what we're gonna do, right? So press K, go into the vertex, C, Z, cut across, press space, K, C, Z, cut across, space, and now that's great. So this is a quad, this is a quad, 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 and everything is nice and quad. So we are done with this piece. I'm gonna jump back out, and well, I'm basically going to do the same thing for all of those. This guy doesn't need one because, well, it's full of quads. It doesn't have any edge going across, but make sure you check out all of those pieces that went through a boolean cut in the previous episode, and you make sure that they all hold quads. So this guy is exactly the same as the one I've made before. See, I select this face, it has 8 vertices. ZBrush and pretty much any sculpting tool is not gonna like that. So what do? We do the same thing. We take out our knife and we cut across in this direction, and we do the same thing in this direction. And now we're gonna do the same thing down here. So the knife tool, we cut like this, and the knife tool once again we're here, and now we have quads, right? Exactly the same process as we've done previously on the other piece. All right, so I'm done with those, right? So I can go into the next one. And one thing I want to do in here is the fact that I don't like that this face is showing off. So I'm gonna select it, and I'm gonna press G, Z, and move it downwards a little bit until it's sitting completely in that blank over there, so I can't see that, right? Alright, so what I'm gonna do right now is I'm actually gonna take care of all those pieces, and I'm just gonna put that on a time lapse because I'm pretty much doing the same thing. So yeah, enjoy that. Alright, and I finished all of those guys, so if I go into all of those, they all have nice topology, and you can see that if you press Alt and right click, the selection flows nicely, and that's what we want. That's how you're doing a good job on those. So I think I didn't miss anyone. Make sure if you have like one of those guys that have a really thin line like that, make sure you also do those, because they're important as well. Alright, so we've taken care of that, and now it's time for us to actually make sure that all of those pieces have some nice and equal topology. And what I mean by that is, so for instance, if I were to take this guy, what we need to do is we need to fill this mesh basically with loop cuts until we make a lot of squares like that. And the reason we need to do that is that now if I were to subdivide this, we can see that all of those are equally distributed, right? And that's what we want, because that means we are gonna have a nice distribution of detail into the mesh when we are gonna go sculpting. And if I were to leave it the way it was, right, and I would be subdividing this, now we are gonna get a lot more detail, for instance, in those areas, because there's a lot more squares, there's a lot more geometry in here than we would be able to get on top, for instance, or on the bottom. And that's why it's really important to basically go on over all the pieces that we're gonna use for sculpting. So in our case is everything that's in here. I'm actually gonna delete this guy because I have a kind of a trick for that. So you can go ahead and delete that guy as well if you had that in there. So what I'm gonna do now is basically go over all of those and add a bunch of loop cuts and make sure they all have a right distribution of topology. But before I do that, I'm gonna take those guys. So I'm gonna select both of them. I'm gonna go into edit mode. I'm gonna select the cap. I'm gonna go Control B, and I'm gonna bevel this a little bit, just like that. Right, that's fine. And yeah, that's all right, I guess. So yeah, let's just go ahead and do exactly what I was saying. So going to edit mode and just add a bunch of loop cuts. I'm gonna go with maybe like 15 for this guy and one across like this, and make sure we get like squares. That's important. All right, so I'm gonna leave it like that, and I'm gonna do pretty much the same thing. I wonder if I were to select those guys and just object data like this, nah, it changes a little bit. All right, so I'm just gonna go through all of those and I'm gonna do the same thing. All right, so just like that. It's really easy and fast to do it. So what I'm doing is I'm basically do a Control R for that loop edge over there. I press enter and I just do press 15. No, sorry. So do the edge loop right like that, and until you see it, press 15, enter twice, and at that one, just go to the next one, 15, one across, 15, one across, 15, one across, and look at that, all of those are nice and distributed like that. So I'm gonna do the same thing on those guys. So let's see, let's actually do one across like this, and let's see how many of those do I want. I think 10, that's pretty okay. So I'm gonna do 10, one across, then one across. We have 2 more, 10, 1, 10, and 1. Right? So for those guys, I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna put 1 across, and let's see how many do we need until we have squares. It seems that 16 is a good number, so let's work with that. 16, 1 across, 16, and 1 across. Right, now we need to do the same thing for those guys. So if I go into edit mode, you see this guy has a lot more loops going horizontally than it has vertically. So we're gonna do loop cuts like this until we get something close to squares. So I'm gonna do 40 cuts on that. I'm gonna do 40 here as well. What else? Like this guy needs to have a bunch of those. Yeah, so I'm gonna do like 100. Yeah, that's all right. I'm gonna jump into this guy. Let's see how many does he want. Maybe like, yeah, 40, the same as the other guys. And this guy is gonna need a little bit more. So I'm actually gonna do beveling in here as well, something like that. And let's see how many loop cuts would this guy want. Maybe 100 as well. Yeah, that seems fair enough. And you know, we need to end up with those dense meshes like that, because that's gonna be our base mesh for sculpting, right? So do 100 on this guy as well, 100 in here, and which one is it? This guy, 100. That's right. Is there anyone who I've missed? The cabin, and like this guy as well. So let's do some loop cuts in here, some loop cuts in here, and some in here. Yeah, that seems about right. Let's do a couple like this, and I think that's all right. Maybe even do some loop cuts in there and one over there, right? That seems all right. And this guy should get the same treatment. So let's do 5 cuts. Let's do 1 cut over here, and this guy, maybe we do a couple of insets like this. That's right. I'm actually gonna grab those guys as well. So you know what, I'm actually not even gonna sculpt those guys. They are too little and they don't really need sculpting, so I'm just gonna skip those. I'm gonna skip that guy as well, and let's get into the planks. Right, so this guy, let's do 1 across, and let's see how many, like 28. Yeah, that seems like an alright number. So let's do like 28. That's too much. Maybe do like 14. Yeah, half of that. And oh, I actually have a loop cut in here, which I don't know why it's in there. So I'm gonna select that. I'm gonna press Ctrl X to dissolve it, and now I can see that I can actually do loop cuts. So let's do 9. That seems pretty squarish, maybe even 8. Yeah, that seems alright. Go to the next one. Gonna do, let's see how many. Let's go with 13. Alright. And you know what, I'm actually gonna go into a little time lapse and do the rest of those, because I think you guys are getting boring of me doing the same shit over and over again. So I see you when I'm done with those. Alright, so I came across a problem right here. So, you know, I was trying to add some loop cuts, and as you can see, they don't appear right, right? So this edge over here doesn't appear, and if I try to do the same in here, it just looks wrong. And if you go into the vertex mode, then you can see that we have a couple of lost vertices. So this guy, I'm gonna dissolve that. I'm gonna dissolve this guy as well. And now, you know, the loop cut should go across as it should, right? And the same happening over here. So if you're doing this process and you come across some problems like this, where the loop cuts don't look right, make sure to check out your topology, and most likely you're gonna find some lost edges or something in there. Yeah, so just make sure everything is clean. So if your loop cuts look alright, then the mesh is clean, right? Okay, so back to the time lapse. Alright guys, and I think that's it for all of those planks and pieces. So if I am to hide this guy and this guy and these guys, which I can actually, you know, just select, and I'm gonna make them one single object, so it's easier to select them all and hide them. And actually I'm gonna add some beveling in here like this. Yeah, that's fine. And if I were to select everything and go into edit mode, and you know, I can see that, well, I've forgotten this guy, but except for that guy, I think everything is yeah, everything is done. So I'm gonna select this guy and I'm gonna do one loop across. I just forgot to do that. Alright, so I'm gonna hide everything that I don't need to export, so I only get those guys, those best meshes. And yeah, that's fine. I'm actually going to fill this gap over there like that. That's fine. Actually, let's see if ZBrush has problems with those pieces that are not filled. Alright, you know what I'm gonna do? Just to make it easier, I'm just gonna hide those icons so I don't see those guys anymore, like that. Alright, that's fine. And this is the mesh that I'm gonna bring into ZBrush, right? So let's go ahead, select everything, and go export FBX. Let's go and do base mesh, and let's just export the selected objects like so, right? And now let's take a break and jump into ZBrush, and we're gonna continue from there. Alright guys, so we are now inside of ZBrush, and this is how everything looks like when you first open it up. To get rid of this menu, just press the comma button, and let's get our base mesh imported into here. So I'm gonna go into import, I'm gonna go to where I have the base mesh exported, and I'm just gonna double click on the FBX. Make sure you have import sets as polygroups, so you can have all the objects separated and work on those individually. So just press OK, and we are gonna see that we have 49 objects. File is imported, and now just keep the shift button pressed and just drag like this, and you'll get your base mesh. To make this editable, you need to press T, and now you can move around. Let's press P to get into the perspective view, and this is our base mesh that we are gonna work with and we are gonna sculpt right now. Right, so what I want to do in sculpting at the moment is to add all of those, you know, wood, fibers and edge damage, so we're gonna get some really nice detail, right? Alright, so to get started, first we need to select one piece that we want to work with on, actually, and let's say we are gonna start by working on this guy. So press Alt, right on, and left click on that guy, and it's gonna get highlighted, and you know that's, you know, an active element. Now if I go ahead and sculpt, you can see that it suffers some changes, right? First thing we need to do is we want to increase the resolution, right? Because now if I sculpt something, you can see it's really blocky, and that's not what we want. What we actually want is to go under geometry, go to Dynamesh, and choose a pretty high value. So let's say 124, and just click Dynamesh. And now the resolution changed, and if I were to go ahead and sculpt, you can see we have a lot more detail right now, right? It's not blocky anymore. And we can also do this. All right, so for the purpose of what we're gonna do, I have some brushes downloaded, and I'm gonna leave a link where you can get those. They're free and makes creating wood really easy, right? So it's those four, and I'm just gonna take the FR Wood 03, just click on that. I'm gonna jump into the top view, and now if I left click and drag, you can see we get some wood fibers, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So, you know, I'm gonna make those fibers like this, and I'm gonna make sure to go all the way around to do so. So we get some of that. Maybe you can press the Alt button and get some of those inserted, right? So we get some really nice detail like that. I'm gonna do the edge over here as well. I'm going to do the sides, so that's important as well. Now this is the place we're gonna spend a little bit of time and get those things looking really nice. At some point I'm actually gonna do obviously a time lapse, because this is pretty repetitive, and I'm not gonna sit here and bore you by doing the same shit all the time. At least I don't like seeing that in other people's tutorials, so I'm not gonna bore you, right? So this guy is done with the fibers, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump into the clay brush, and I'm gonna do some damage like that, right? So I hold the Alt key, so I'm gonna push instead of pull, and I'm gonna do a little bit of damage like this, right? Super nice and super easy. Just get the object to look a little bit more organic, right? So do some actual cuts in this guy, and it already starts to look really good. right? Do some edge damages in here as well, like so, right? And just make sure you go through all of those, and you pretty much just sculpt away, do details that you want to have on the piece. You can do some damage in between the planks as well, just to separate them a little bit more, right? That looks kind of all right. Now let's get back into this and do the same thing. I really don't like having sharp corners like that, especially on some pieces of wood that, you know, they're supposed to be old and weathered, and this whole cabin is sitting on water, so you know, water does a lot of damage on the wood. So we should make sure that we incorporate that into our design as well, right? So this step is pretty tedious, and not gonna lie, this is what took the most in my actual project, just sitting around and doing all this to you know, the whole piece practically, basically. So I'm obviously gonna rush at the moment because, well, I don't want to sit around and do the same thing again, since I've done it for my actual project. So I'm just showing you what I've done and how I've done it, and how I was thinking about the process, and then I'm gonna let you do the actual, you know, work, because I've already done this once. I don't need to learn from it again, right? So do some edges. So for instance here, we have two pieces connecting, and it's always a good idea to kind of add some kind of detail in that area, right? Maybe like that. Maybe the wood gets pushed up or down or something, just to make that transition a little bit better and not have that perfect straight line, right? Because that never looks great. Okay, so we took care of that guy, and then what I'm going to do, I'm gonna alt click on this next piece, and I'm gonna take care of it in the same exact way I've done for the other guy. So first, make sure you do the Dynamesh. So 124 Dynamesh, and now you're free to go ahead and add all those details, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and do this across the whole plank once again, nice and easy, like so. Now I'm gonna go all the way on the other side over here, right? So where is it? In here. Go closer. Just add this as well. And I'm gonna switch back to the clay brush, and I'm gonna do the same kind of damage, right? So I'm gonna take care of those corners. As I said, I really don't like when those are really straight like that. I want my objects to look nice and organic and random, and like they've seen some shit over their life, right? Those are old beams, planks. So we need to make sure we incorporate that. Right, so let's do some edge damages. So maybe make the brush a little bit bigger. Add some really nice and deep crevices in there. Again, I'm hurrying up a bit because I'm not gonna sit around and do the same thing again, because, well, there's nothing here for you to actually learn is just about executing the same idea over and over again for like 49 pieces of wood, basically. Yeah, so let me just finish this guy up. Let's put a dent in there as well. Yeah, that's pretty nice and dandy like that. Maybe add a little bit of edge wear over there. Yeah, that's nice and organic. Maybe add a little bit more damage on the sides in here, like that. So it makes sense. If this guy was hit and damaged in this area, then most likely the other plank would get hit as well, and you should see some kind of damage in the same kind of area, like that. It just makes sense, right? All right, so yeah, that's pretty much the process of doing the planks. And what I've ended up doing is in my for my actual project, because I'm a lazy guy, right? So I'm not gonna sit around and I'm gonna do all of those pieces. So what I've ended up doing, I've done a couple of those. So let's say I've made like 3 or maybe 4 in total, and the rest I've left them the way they are. And then when you switch back to Blender, I'm just gonna take those pieces, I'm gonna rotate them and move them around so they don't look the same. And I'm basically just gonna move this guy from here to here, and I'm gonna reuse the same 3 planks to cover the whole area, so I don't sit around like a stupid guy and do all of those pieces for nothing, right? We can work smarter than that. We don't need to work hard. So I'm gonna leave those guys, 2 guys, done, right? And let's say I'm gonna jump into this guy, and here we can do the same type of deal, right? So those guys are all the same length, at least they're similar, right? And that's the reason you can do that trick over here. You can pretty much use like a modular approach where you've made a couple of those and then you reuse and recycle those to make your actual scene. So I'm gonna do the same thing in here, where I'm just gonna do this guy and maybe the second guy, and then I'm just gonna reuse those 2 pieces to fill up the other 3, and I'm gonna do the same thing in here, right? So I'm just gonna do one of the planks, I'm gonna reuse that for the other 2. So select one of those, make sure you dynamesh it so you have enough resolution to work with, and well, it's just the same kind of approach, right? You go ahead, you do the wood, you go on the side, and you do the wood in here as well. So yeah, that's what we are going to do at the moment. Alright, so the reason we are doing this by sculpting and not by texturing, there's a reason for that. And the reason is, well, textures are depending on UV space and resolution, right? So depending on how many items or UV islands I have in my UV space, the UV space for one plane could be pretty small, right? So you can end up with not having enough detail in that. So it's always a good idea, if you have the time and if you can afford to, just sculpt the major details and then just bake that into the texture, right? And the model is gonna look way better if you do that, trust me. So here I'm just making the fibers all the way over there, and I'm gonna switch back to the clay mode, and I'm gonna do the damage like that, something like this. Maybe just like really go deep into this guy. He's seen some shit, right? Now let's do some edge damage on the margin like that, on the bottom as well. That's great. Let's do on those sides as well, maybe over there where it connects with the cabin. Let me get closer. And the brush is a little too big, so let's make it smaller. Yeah, just like that. That's nice. Right, so all right. While we're here, let's just, waste some time and talk about random shit. Well, I'm trying to get this, tutorial series out there, and I hope you guys really enjoyed. I'm actually really trying here to, to give out some info about my workflows and the way I kind of do things and the way that I do things, and I was able to get like clients and jobs and all that kind of stuff, which I suppose you guys want as well. So I'm trying to teach that. I don't know if I'm the best teacher at the moment. I'm still finding out about the best ways to go through stuff, to tutorials, and get the most out of what I do in here, right? Because if I do those tutorials and you guys don't relate to those, then it's pretty much pointless. So I always welcome critiques and suggestions in the comments. If you feel like I'm explaining shit too fast or too slow, make sure to let me know, because I really need the feedback, especially now when I'm in the beginning phase, and I'm trying to find my style with those tutorials. I'm trying to understand what's the best way of approaching subjects and topics in order to be easier for people to understand and learn valuable stuff, because that's the whole point, right? We need to learn and get good at what we do over here. So here I am just adding those fibers as well. That's great. I actually realized that I've never done like an introductory video for the channel, so I've never really talked about who I am, what I do, and why you should listen to me and watch me do like tutorials. So for those who don't know, and I guess that's everybody, I'm an environment artist and a technical artist working for Forbidden currently. So I'm working in the game industry, right? So my role is to basically take care of the environments and map and levels of games. I make the models, I set up like the environments and assemble those. I do the level design, and I'm also a technical artist. And a technical artist is pretty much a combination of a programmer somewhat and an artist. And I actually come from a programming background, if you believe that. When I was about 9 years old, I started really getting into programming, and I would program websites, and I would do like small apps and games at the time. But in the meantime, I kind of realized that actually like programming is not something that I want to do, not professionally. I don't want to be constrained to just sit around and write code for 8 to 10 hours every single day. That's kind of boring for me. I want something a little bit more dynamic, and I actually realized that I really like developing and creating stuff that, you know, expresses something visually. So that's why I've got into like 3D art. That, and also the fact that when I was a kid, I wanted to make my own games, and you know, my standards were high. I wanted to do like AAA games by myself, which is nuts, and that's crazy. You're never gonna be able to do like AAA games by yourself. But you know, I was 13, 14 at the time, and full of dreams and hopes. And I realized that my games are never gonna look as good as I want them to look, unless I get, you know, like an actual 3D artist to work on my games. But you know, if you are young, when you're 13, you don't really have money to pay people, right? That should make sense. So okay, what do you do when you don't have money to pay someone to do something? Well, you just learn to do that thing by yourself, right? At least that's how I've approached that idea. So that's pretty much the main reason why I've gotten into 3D art, is because I wanted to make like really cool looking games, and not being able to afford to pay someone, I realized that I have the luxury of time to just learn that shit. And even though I was really doubtful at first, because being a programmer, I've always thought that I don't have any artistic skill in my mind, or I'm not gonna be able to learn something so artistic because it's not based on numbers or code or all that good nice stuff. But you know, fast forward a couple of years, and I'm now getting paid to do exactly what I thought I could never do, which is funny how things work out in the end. But you know, that's cool. So back to the technical artist aspect. A technical artist is someone who pretty much combines art and tech. So for instance, here in the studio where I work, I'm pretty much creating custom tools for environments. So, you know, making like system of creating the environments completely procedural, or pretty much making the life easier for other level artists, right? Because I'm also an environment artist. I know what would make my life easier, so I'm just building the tools that I know would make my life easier and more efficient. And myself and other level designers work with those tools, and you know, we get shit done faster because it's all procedural and nice and automatic and all that good stuff. So if you follow me on Twitter, I always post some of the work I'm doing. It's just easier to post over on Twitter than some other places, because on Instagram I feel the need to post only like really good stuff, but really good stuff takes, you know, time to be produced and developed, so you can really post that often over there. So make sure to follow my Twitter as well. Alright, so I'm pretty much done with those. For the rest, I'm not gonna do the rest, as I've said. When I get back into Blender, I'm just gonna reutilize those guys and copy and paste them around until I fill the whole area, right? Let's go ahead and do one of those guys, because for those guys I'm gonna do the same thing. So let's dynamesh those guys, and I'm gonna use another brush. I'm gonna use the Bark 02, and now let's use Bark 07. Yeah, right. So let's just drag and drop like so, and add some details over on this guy, just like that. And up here as well. Don't forget about that. Right, so okay, that's pretty much it. And if you want, you can also go into the clay brush as well and add some damage onto the top or other parts as well. So for instance, let's just cut into the mesh over here like that. Maybe you want to do some damage on the bottom as well. So, you know, I'm gonna do a cut like that. Just go crazy with those, you know. You can see some references and you can copy some of the stuff that you see in photos, so you get more realistic results than what I'm doing right now, which is just going by eye and freestyling this stuff, right? So, you know, you can do some damage like that. Now, right, so I'm just gonna jump to the next one. Make sure you dynamesh it for extra resolution. Get the bark. Pretty much just do the same thing. Right, make sure to go on all sides and add those sculpts everywhere. So on the top as well. Yep, that's nice. Cool. Right, so I'm just gonna move as fast as I can through those. This guy, I'm gonna do the same thing for this guy. Some dynamesh it. I'm just gonna do the bark as well, so just like this. Make sure you go all the way up, right? You can even switch, you can add maybe like a knot as well. If you were to want that, I don't really care about it. You can even switch and do like the same kind of detail, right? You can add detail on top of detail. Just get creative with those. There is no rules in here. If you like it, then it's good, right? So here I just changed in the mid in the mid of the sculpting to another brush, and now we get completely different results, right? So can I say, just make sure you spend the time and do get exactly the results that you want to get, right? I'm obviously not going to spend the exact same time and attention on those guys because, well, this is for me just a tutorial, but for you it's gonna be the real deal, so make sure you spend time on those. So for this guy, let's just do it like this. That's great. And just like that. Going to the other side. All right, and I've got one of those. Just switch between those and do, you know, just do the sculpting. That's pretty much what I need to say. I'm not gonna show you the way I'm gonna, you know, I'm not gonna show you every single piece of those. I'm not gonna do them anymore because it's pretty much the same exact shit as this guy, right? You just select it, you dynamesh it, you get your wood brush, you cover it with wood detail, maybe add some edge damage with the clay brush, and that's it. The same thing for those guys, right? Just those are planks, so they're gonna be the exact same way as you have done those guys. So just, you know, copy the process and do it all over those pieces. For the cabin pieces, yeah, you can either do all of them, or you can either cheat and do as I've done, where I've just done one piece and then I've copy and pasted that, and those guys as well. So for instance, if you were to sculpt this guy, and this guy, that would be enough. And this guy you can sculpt it, and this guy you can just delete it and take this guy and move it in here, right? So that's the same thing. So for now, again, I'm not gonna go through all of this because it takes a lot of time and you're basically just watching me do the same thing in just different areas. Let's just do the roof for now, and then I'm gonna switch back to Blender and I'm gonna import the sculpted object, the original sculpted object, because I'm not gonna wait and do all of those, right? So let's just do this guy. And what can you do with this guy? Let's do the clay and let's just add some edge damage. Okay, so 124, I'm gonna dynamesh it. Make sure this is your total points. You know, I'm almost in a 1 million poly count. So with dynameshing, you're adding a lot of detail. So you know, keep that in mind. Right, let's just add a bunch of damage onto this guy to make it look organic. Right. So that's nice. Cool. Let's do some areas in here as well. All right, you can do that on the bottom as well. You know, be creative. That's always what you need to do. Just be creative and try stuff, even if you're not sure if it works or not. The only way to really find out if something's good or not is to try it out and see for yourself. Never be afraid of trying shit. By trying, you learn, and by learning, you earn, right? So that's something. Maybe I'm gonna make the brush a little bit smaller. Add some small cuts like that in here as well. Maybe it goes all the way like that. That could be something. Yep, kind of like that. And I mean, you get the point, right? It's just going onto the edges and adding, making it look organic and not just be like a complete block. A straight edge and corners. That never looks good. Alright, so I'm just gonna keep it like that for now. And yeah, so let's say that you've just gone through all of those and you've sculpted all the necessary parts. Either you've sculpted all individual pieces, either you've done my cheating trick and you've just made a couple of those which you are gonna copy and paste back in Blender. But let's just say, you know, you are happy with your result and now you want to get back into Blender, right? So you've got your sculpted guy over here, and right now if you were to go over to export and export this, you're just gonna get whatever is highlighted or the active poly group, but we want to get the whole thing. And how do we do that? Well, to do that we can go over here to the subtool, we can go to merge and we can merge visible. Now it's gonna appear over here. You can just press on that and now you have this one single object, which is your sculpted base mesh. And now if you were to go to export, you know, and do, I'm gonna call this High-Poly ZBrush, and I'm gonna export it as an FBX. I'm gonna save it, just press OK, and it's gonna take a little bit. File exported, writing data, it takes a while. Okay, so that was exported, and now if I jump back into like Blender, right? So I'm back in Blender, and let's select everything. Let's press M and add this into a new collection, and let's call it the blockout. And that way we don't lose anything. So I'm in the blockout phase, all right, and I'm gonna turn that off. And I can go to File, Import, FBX, and I can import my High-Poly from ZBrush. So I'm gonna double click that. I'm gonna wait a little bit because it's about 1 million polygons, but eventually it's gonna get imported in here. Alright, so as you can see, we have our sculpted mesh inside of Blender. And you know, look at all this nice sculpted detail and how it used to look over here on those pieces that I haven't done. So no, there's a lot of difference in those, and in its realism that is presenting, right? So what you're gonna do, there's a auto material that comes back with this. I'm just gonna take it off because I don't need that. And that's how you import what you've done in ZBrush back into Blender, and you can see that it matches exactly in the size with our blockout, right? It's the exact same scale. That's super nice. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm just gonna import the sculpt that I've originally done in ZBrush, because here I've been lazy and I haven't done all the pieces. So I'm just gonna reutilize the mesh that I've sculpted for my original project. So I'll see you back in 1 minute. Alright guys, so here I am back, and this is actually the original mesh that I've sculpted. So as you can see, when I've done it, I've just made those into 2 pieces. So I've got the platform and I've got the cabin. So as you can see, the same way I've told you guys, I've just made a couple of those. Now I've made about 5 of those, and here I just got lazy and said, fuck it, I'm not gonna do all of those. And right, so here as well, and here as well, I've only done like 2 of those. And what I ended up doing is I just jumped into edit mode and just, you know, took this guy, switch it all the way over here and filled up those pieces. One thing that seems like I've forgotten into the blockout is like these supporting pieces. So you can just go ahead and you add a couple of cubes in there as well, like this guy, right? And just sculpt that as well. It's just another layer of detail that you can either add or not add, you know, depending on how you feel. But yeah, let's say that we are back here, right? We went into ZBrush, you've sculpted our mesh, and let's just finish it off, because now there's planks that I haven't sculpted. So just go into edit mode. Bear in mind that this is gonna move pretty hard. Like, yeah, it's not gonna be fast. Like, this guy is 4.1 million trees, so yeah, you can expect it to move a little bit hard. So just go over one of those planks, press L to select it, right? And now just do a Shift D, and let's move it into the place of those placeholders that I was lazy, that I wasn't, that I was too lazy to sculpt. So I'm gonna move this by on the y-axis, and I know that all of those pieces, all those planks are 50 centimeters, right? So I need to move this, how many planks? I need to move this 3 positions, so that's 1.5 meters, because 3 times 50 centimeters is 1.5 meters, right? So on the y-axis I'm gonna move it by 1.5, and it's gonna go in the bad direction, so just press minus to switch the direction it goes into, right? So just wait a little bit for this to update. And where the fuck is it? Did I move it way too much? No. Alright, it's where it needs to be. I just didn't see it. So now you can unselect that and select this guy and just press X and delete the faces. Now you're gonna get, you know, the other guy, the other plank, the sculpted one, the one that we actually want. And if you want to make sure that you don't get any repetitions, you can always select it and just rotate it around. So for instance, I'm gonna rotate it by 80 degrees on the Z axis, right? So we don't end up with the same kind of thing, and you are not gonna be able to tell that I've just copy and pasted those guys. All right, so let's just take this guy, and we need to move it 1 meter to the right. So I'm just gonna do a Shift D to copy it, press Y, and then just -1 to move it to the next position. Now basically just gonna do the same thing and, you know, finish up my sculpt in here instead of sitting around in ZBrush and sculpting those guys by hand again and again, because that tends to be quite boring in my honest opinion. Alright, so as I said, it's moving a little bit hard. I'm also recording, so there's that. So go ahead, do the, do what you need to do, right? So just copy those around, do the same for here as well. Just copy those guys and replace them here and in here as well. And for this guy, you can delete it and just reuse one of those guys. So just copy that guy, right? And let's see if I just Shift D that guy, that little plank, and I now can move it around. Come on, you can do it. And it moves like shit, right? Yeah, so I just copied that. One thing you can do to make this move faster is just, separate this, so you don't have to sit in edit mode with all those other really dense meshes. So just separate that guy, jump out of the edit mode, and now it's a lot faster to work this way, right? So I'm gonna rotate this by 90 degrees, and I'm gonna place that guy over there, and I'm gonna scale it on the Z axis like so, and I now can delete this placeholder. And this is basically what you're gonna do to all of those pieces that you left out in the sculpting phase. If you did that, if you just enjoyed the process and sculpted all of those, then good job for you. I don't really like sculpting that much, so I tend to just hurry the process because it's really boring to me to just sit around and just like sculpt the same shit all over again. I don't like doing that. I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. It's boring. Yeah, so see, now you've got this piece and everything's nice. So for the cabin, I've done the exact same thing. As you can see, some of those pieces are sculpted, some of those are not. And in the end I just went ahead and got into edit mode, just to select one plank and just move it around until I finish all of those. And that's pretty much how I've completed my sculpt without sculpting all of it, right? Which is really nice. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm gonna just cut this and not show you the whole process of me doing the same thing again. So maybe even I can even just take the final piece from my computer and import that. So I'm see you in a bit. Alright, so here I am back, and this is the final High-Poly. As you can see, all the planks are sculpted, everything's nice and dandy, and the same's happening for the cabin, right? Cool. Right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna select like those guys. You're gonna have one piece or two pieces. Anyway, just select your High-Polys, press M, create a new collection, and just call this High-Poly, right? So we are gonna be nice and organized like this, and we're not gonna do anything else on those guys for now. Those are only gonna be used for baking. So right now we are gonna copy those guys, we're gonna decimate them to make, you know, right now they're 11.5 million polygons, which is really a lot, and it makes the viewport, you know, move a bit laggy in some cases, especially when you're going to the render view, and all those polygons also add to the final render time. And if we can do this with less polygons but keep the same visual fidelity, then why not do that? So for now, let's select all of those, press Shift D to copy those. Bear in mind that we're gonna end up right now with about 25 million polygons, so I hope your computer can handle that. I'm gonna press right click to not move those anywhere, and what I'm going to do now, as you can see we have about 23 million polygons. I'm gonna press M and I'm gonna switch those into a low poly collection, and now I can turn off the high poly, and I'm back to 11 million polygons, right? Which is nice. Alright, so I'm now gonna get my first piece. So I'm gonna take this guy, I'm gonna play the rotation and scale just for good measure. I'm gonna go to the modifiers and I'm gonna do a decimate, right? So I'm gonna decimate the hell out of this guy because he's currently about 3 million. It has 3 million faces, and I'm gonna go as low as I can without losing really losing the details. So let's go with 1% for now and see what we get, right, and how it looks. So the goal right now is to go and make this number as low as possible without compromising the quality of this asset. We're gonna lose like these sharp veins because we need a lot of geometry to hold all of that detail. So we're gonna lose it when you're decimated, but don't worry about that. That's why we're gonna do the baking. So we're gonna get back all this crisp and the sharp detail, but with a lot more optimized topology and poly count. So as you can see, this takes a while. I've inputted 0.01 in there, and it takes a little bit of time to process all of that. Again, the denser the mesh is, then the harder it is to work with it, and that's the main reason why we are decimating this and bringing it to a much more reasonable poly count. So as you can see, 1%. No, we lost some detail, but we now are in a 60,000 polys, which is really nice. So I'm gonna apply that. If you want to go lower, go lower. If you want to preserve some of the details that have been lost, just go higher. It's completely up to you. I've done 1% in my original project, so I'm gonna do 1% for both the platform and the cabin as well. Alright, and another reason for decimating this is it's gonna be much easier to and faster to UV unwrap that, all of those meshes. And secondly, for the next video, when we are gonna jump into Substance Painter, it's gonna be a whole lot faster to just texture something that's a lot more optimized than something that's like 5 million polygons, right? The computer is gonna love us, we are gonna love it, and in the end everyone is gonna be a lot more happier with a much lesser dense like mesh, right? So again, I've just hit apply. It takes a while for it to understand what he's supposed to do, because it's such a dense mesh that again it's pretty hard to work with that. So I'm gonna come back once I do the same thing for the cabin as well, right? So just take the cabin and do a decimate on it, and I'm gonna do 1%, so 0.01 as well, and I'm gonna cut and come back when that's done. Okay, so I've re-decimated this guy and made it a much higher density mesh, because I kind of broke it with that 1% decimated. So yeah, okay, so make sure those are all under low poly. And what we gonna do right now, so I'm just gonna delete all those, because this is my actual low poly mesh, so it has the materials already set it, but we're gonna do that in the next video, right? So this is where you are gonna be as well. You just decimated your high poly, and now you ended up with this mesh, which is, you know, instead of it being about 12 million polygons, it's now just under 500,000, which is a lot more doable. And right now what we want to do is we want to UV unwrap this. So let me just go ahead and remove my UVs for now, because as I said, this is my original piece and it's already UV unwrapped. But what do we want to do is, I'm just gonna delete everything that's not being used. I'm just gonna create a new material. I'm gonna call this UV. I'm gonna create a new texture for it, so go image texture, new, and go with UV grid, right? And this is gonna help us understand if our UVs are alright. And because this is such a simple like object, and the textures are also gonna be, you know, a lot of the detail from the texture is gonna come from the high poly, not from the actual texture. So we can get away with something really easy. So I'm gonna jump into the material view. I'm gonna jump into edit mode, right? And I'm just gonna do U and smart UV project. I'm gonna go OK, and I'm already gonna get some nice UVs, because the objects are pretty simple, right? It's just a bunch of cubes and cylinders. Yeah, you can see like the UVs are fucked in here, but that's not gonna matter. The baking and the textures are gonna look okay, because I've tested that. So as long as the final result looks okay, I don't care if it's technically correct or not, right? So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go into UV editing, and I'm just gonna use the UV Packmaster just to optimize this a little bit. Apparently, nah, I'm not gonna use it since I need to set up something and I don't feel like doing it in the video. So let's do the same for the cabin as well. Let's add the UV material on that, and let's just do a smart UV project. wait a little bit because this is a bigger mesh. It's about 250,000 polygons, right? So it takes a little bit for it to compute all of that. But yeah, that's gonna be done, and I'm gonna have UVs, and that's pretty much all we're gonna cover this in this video. So in the next video, we're gonna take our low poly, we're gonna get that into Substance Painter, we're gonna do, baking, and I'm gonna project all the details from the high poly onto this low poly version, and then we're gonna start texturing it, adding like the wood texture and the dirt and water and all that crazy and nice stuff, and we're gonna make this look really nice and realistic. And basically the next video is where your creativity is gonna play a big role, because you can make this guy look exactly how you want, right? So in the next video you don't even have to copy what I do one by one. You can just go ahead and use whatever colors you want, what kind of dirt you want. You can make it more dirty, you can make it cleaner. That's all on you, and a lot of creativity is going to be unleashed in the next part of the series, where you're going to talk about texturing and making everything look realistic and nice. Alright guys, so this is it for today's video. As you can see, we've ended up with a low poly version, a high poly version, and well, we just covered sculpting. We've covered a bit of modularity, where we were able to take a couple of those pieces and continue the rest of those without actually putting like manual work into that. So we've learned a little bit of trickeries as well, which is always helpful. And we've covered a little bit of UV unwrapping. Obviously we haven't gotten into detail on that, but if it works for now, then we don't care about it, right? So in the next video, what we're gonna cover is we're gonna go ahead and we are gonna apply all the materials that we want all over those pieces. So we're gonna end up with a bunch of materials. We're gonna do a little bit of UV unwrapping to get some more texture resolution on those, and then we are gonna jump into Substance Painter. We are gonna do some baking, we are gonna do some texturing, and we are gonna come back with this guy looking really, really nice. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed that and you've learned some new stuff, and we'll see you next week.